Hello, welcome to the Glue Factory featuring the Mustang. In the last video, we managed to put the square peg into the circle hole. And what I mean by that is we managed to put the 302 in a place where it didn't fit, but thanks to the angle grinder, it now fits. Look what we did. We cut it, we ruined it. We've managed to shift the engine back about 5 inches, as well as lowered the engine about 3 to 4 inches. Looking at it from above, you can very well see how far the engine is pushed back. But while we were trying to fit the engine, this guy named Rack and Pinion was in the way, so that required us to chop off the firewall. But that's not the end of our clearance issues, because before we make the engine mounts and permanently weld this engine in place, we also have to think about the header clearance. Having the Mustang 2 suspension clears up a whole lot of room here in the engine bay, so header clearance shouldn't be an issue. But being that we moved the engine back a bit, I just want to make sure we do have enough clearance for the headers. This guy right here might also cause us some clearance issues, but we'll get to that later. In order to know the header fitment, well, we need headers. Ta-da! We bought a cheap setters. We bought a cheap setter headers. We bought a cheap set of headers off of Facebook Marketplace. They definitely look cheap. If one of you guesses how much we paid for these, I'll pin the comment. Anyway, now that we have headers, we can now bolt them on so we could finally see where we want to weld this engine in place. But we can't yet bolt on the engine mounts because some idiot decided to bolt the chains onto the engine mount points. So that means that, once again, we have to tango with the engine. Okay, bit dramatic. In the last video, I received a lot of good tips and suggestions. And one of those suggestions was that instead of putting the engine leveler perpendicular to the engine, we should put it in parallel like this. But the issue that I think we would have with that is if we need to bolt it onto the head, then we'd have about 3/4 of an inch of the bolt sticking towards the firewall. And if you guys remember in the last video, the head was about 1/2 inch away from the firewall. Therefore, if we were to bolt the chains onto the head, we would be hitting before we even get to the location where the engine was before. Screw it, we're just gonna do it how you guys suggested. And we'll address the clearance issues when we get there. Well, I think I cross-threaded that one. I think we're back in business. This time we'll hand thread it first and not go straight to the impact like an idiot. There we go. I don't know why in the hell I bought triple square bolts if I don't even own triple square sockets. This is actually working pretty good. Oh yeah, and we're leveled right at 0 degrees on the chain. Thank you guys. All right, so this method is not going to work because the chain is already hitting against this cowling lip before we even get the engine in place. Back out it goes. Well, that was ridiculously annoying. We're gonna have to find another location for those chains to be mounted. And then on top of that, I forgot to mount the headers, which was the whole reason we were putting the engine back in. Yeah, good thing that this radiator support was already going to be replaced because we definitely dented it more than it already was. Just realized how carried away I got. I forgot to bolt on not only the headers, but the engine mounts as well. Oh, right. I didn't show you guys the engine mounts. The motor mounts that I got from the Mustang are from Speedway. I felt like this was going to be the best fit because these brackets bolt directly onto the block, and then these are pretty much cut to fit for your application. And these will get bolted onto the bracket right here. It's kind of dumb they didn't include a bolt. I find that a bit ridiculous, but these brackets are meant to go directly onto the cross member, something like this. So because we relocated the engine a couple inches backwards, they're going to have to sit somewhere back here now, which will work because we did reinforce this frame by boxing it. So these motor mount brackets are a bit offset, as you can see. I'm going to mount the brackets in the way where the bushing is biased towards the rear. Alrighty, so now we can see how their motor mounts are gonna look. Once again, these are Speedway motor mounts. This is not sponsored. This is just what I thought would be the best option for us. Damn, how much tries is that gonna take? And these are most likely not the headers that we're gonna use when the car is running, but these are just for mock-up purposes. Hopefully we can get some better ones when the time comes. Once we get these on, we can address the chain situation. All right, so now we can address the chain situation. As far as the front of the engine, we could leave the chains in the regular location. We just need to make the chain links a bit shorter because the engine hoist was already maxed out and we still weren't clearing that radiator support. As far as the rear chains go, I was going to mount it to the head bolt, but I feel like in this location, it would still hit that cowling lip. So we are going to do the unthinkable and wrap it around the headers. Change of plans, we're gonna use the head bolts to strap on the chain because that will push the chain forward, therefore it won't get in the way of that cowling lip, I think. Well, let's see if this will even work. And if it bends up our valve covers, that's completely fine. And once again, we are clocked in at 0 degrees. That took way longer than it should have. But that's why I appreciate Denny O and Chris M for this episode's coffee. Oh, that didn't work. So taking a look inside the car, once the transmission was in, this has a little dip. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but this little dip is causing the shifter housing to hit from under. So we're gonna have to cut this thing out. With this piece cut out, you can better see what I meant by dip. So you can see it has a little bit of a bowl shape here. Odds are we're gonna need to do way more trimming in this area once the transmission is in so we could get the shifter location right. Alrighty folks, after a million micro adjustments, the engine is now where I believe will be its permanent place. As far as header clearance, we are looking pretty damn good. Again, this is probably not the header that we will be running, but this gives us a good idea. I did want to run some long tube headers, but these shorty headers are pretty much all I could afford right now. But for these mock-up purposes, these are working just fine. Here is our right side engine mount, and we have pretty good clearance right here. We have lots of clearance on the passenger side for the engine mount, but here is our biggest clearance issue so far. So our biggest clearance issue at the moment is that the steering shaft is going directly towards the engine mount. And if you guys remember, we have to weld these triangle pieces alongside that engine mount. As far as what we're gonna do to get around that steering rack issue, I'm not too sure yet, but I think as of right now, it's time to start trimming up these motor mounts. All right, so we have our little triangles here, and we have to figure out where we would like them to go. So obviously, with the engine being lowered and not being on the cross member, these aren't going to be a direct fitment. Let's see what we can do. So step one is to make these a little bit easier to work with. There we go. All right, so with our cardboard template, we're gonna go ahead and mock it up. Obviously, it's not going to fit. So the center of the hole is right about here. So I'm gonna make a little mark right there. So the mark that we made is right here. I just drew a straight line down to help us measure from the center of the hole to that mark we made. So that looks like 1 1/4 inches. Therefore, we have to remove 1 1/4 inches from this side. So this is our template. I'm going to leave a little bit of material here at the top just in case we need it. If not, we can just cut it out. Okay, back with our template. Okay, I just completely cut out that extra bit, but it looks like we are right on the money here. All right, so here's another view of how this template is going to work, how our brackets are going to work. So we're mounted directly onto the frame rail in the area that we boxed. So that is perfect for what we're doing here. Okay, so we're going to mock up our cardboard templates here. We're going to bolt them down. Yes, sir. That looks pretty damn sick. Honestly, this gets me very excited because this was a step that I was a bit intimidated of, but this just gets us one step closer. It's pretty much what it's gonna look like. Basically just going to rinse and repeat the same steps. All right, so with our new templates, I'm assuming that we're going to have to make the same kind of cut. Looks like it'll be the same thing on the other side. All right, we have 2 templates, which look to be working fine. Let's put a bolt through them and see where we're at. All right, that looks like it will work. The driver's side looks complete now. That should be plenty of material to be able to weld a solid bead on there. We are going to reinforce these 2 tabs by squaring off the metal, but now you guys can see the rough approximation of what the engine mounts will look like. Right, so now that we know they fit, let's go ahead and turn them into metal. With the mock-up mounts now off of the car, we can now turn them into metal. Right, so I have them marked with the passenger front, passenger rear, driver front, driver rear. Odds are they're pretty much the same, but just to keep them organized. So only one thing left to do. All right. All right, all of our pieces are now cut. You can see we're pretty damn close there. On the driver's side, I left probably a 1/16 of an inch extra, just so we can compensate for that left and right difference there was. But other than that, let's try them on. Let's get this piece installed. All right, so one thing I am not liking is that this front bracket is so close to this shock tower, so it's going to be very hard to weld in between there because there's already some weld. So I might need to cut that down or just weld it from the inside. We'll see what we do about that. But other than that, this side looks pretty damn good. I just realized I labeled them for nothing because looks like I put the rear one in the front and the front one in the rear. All right, as far as the driver's side goes, well, the extra bit that I left on there is certainly showing. So as you can see, the bracket does not line up with the hole very well. As I said, I left about a 1/16 of an inch extra on here just in case we needed to make any adjustments. But there's 2 things we can do here. We can take 1/16 of an inch off of the other side, or we can take 1/16 of an inch off of this side. The reason I would want to take 1/16 of an inch off the passenger side, because the engine is just slightly over to the driver's side. So therefore that would help center the engine. Even though I think 1/16 of an inch is probably not gonna make any difference at all. Just a thought. So in order for me to take off 1/16 of an inch from here and not make too much of a mess of it, I'm going to use this scrap piece that has this very straight edge. And I'm going to give myself about a 1/16 of a difference right here. Clamp them both together. Right, so now you can better see the difference here. This scrap piece is just gonna help us not go too far. It's not going to be perfect, but then again, I'm not a robot that can make a perfect cut, so this is just going to help us make it a bit easier. This is starting to remind me of the cross member install, where we had to trim it like 2,000 times. Seems like we're not even taking anything off. Let's give this side a go. I think, okay, there's one, there's two. Freaking sick. All right, so we now got the driver's side in. It's looking pretty damn good. I'm getting very excited, getting jittery. Passenger side is pretty much ready to be welded as well. So if you guys remember the video where we installed the Explorer differential in the car, we only tacked the purchase so we could adjust the pinion angle later on to wherever we set the engine. But coincidentally, the engine is exactly the same pinion angle right now as the differential, so I think we lucked out on that one. I could say that I meant to do that and that it was my plan all along, but that was so lucky. I'm gonna go buy a lotto ticket. Anyway, before we weld these pieces, I'm gonna put a slight bevel into it, like we do with all the other thick metals. Our welder's not powerful enough, but that should help us. All right, passenger front, passenger rear. This is where it starts becoming real. We are one step away from welding these in. I'd be lying if I said I was not nervous. I don't know if there's a bakery nearby, but it's like 7 p.m. and it smells very delicious. It's coming into the shop and it's getting me hungry. Anyway. One side. All right, both of them are in. I'm just gonna double check, triple check, because once I weld, this engine is staying there. So I'm checking for a couple things before I start welding it. The engine is sitting pretty at 0 degrees. We've got about 1/2 inch of clearance from the oil pan to the cross member. I wanted to leave a little bit less than 1/2 inch, but I was trying to compensate for the sag that it might have with the motor mounts. But if it were to come into contact, we'll address that and fix it. As well as 1/2 inch or just a finger's width from the valve cover to the firewall. The bell housing is barely clearing at the moment. I know it looks like it's hitting, but it's not. And one of you guys made a very good point where the plate that goes in between the bell housing and the block of the engine would push the bell housing backwards a little bit. That's a very good point. The clearance is already very tight, but if that plate were to push the bell housing into the firewall, well, we'll just dent it so it won't. The shifter location is also pretty centered where we want it. All right, it is now time to shake off the nerves and to get this thing welded in. I think I'm only going to tack the tops and the bottoms of the plate for now, and then once we remove the engine, we'll run a full bead. Can't really see very well. Okay, not bad. I completely missed the plate. All right, tops have been welded. Let me see how I can get to the bottom. I can barely see under here. Ow. All right, so we've got a couple tacks on that passenger side. I think it should be enough to pull the engine without those breaking off, but we haven't had too good of a track record with tack welds. Let's go! All right, time for some more zaps. It's kind of hard to put the tacks when I can't really see what I'm doing. The plates are now tacked in. They're not the prettiest tacks in the world, but I think they will do fine. Both sides got one tack on the top and the bottom, as well as one on either side. So now we need to remove the engine in order for us to weld a full bead on those plates. But the question is, will those tacks hold while we pull the engine out? Let's find out. All right, we've got the engine unbolted. It's time to pick it up. I'm nervous, begging the tack welds not to break. It would be a Christmas miracle. Let's do it. They are slowly sliding out of the plates. Oh! Oh! Okay, it's out. And the tacks did not break off or bend the plates. Ah, yeah, right. All right, we broke one of them. Okay, so one of them didn't survive. I realize now that it wasn't entirely the tack's fault. The bell housing was hitting, so in order for the engine to go up, it was pushing itself forward, therefore breaking that tack. So that might be an issue putting it back in, but let's get it out and figure it out. All right, right here we can see the tack that broke off and pulled this plate forward. So there's a couple reasons why that could have happened. One being that my tack was not strong enough. Two is, like I said, in order for the engine to go up, it needed to come forward, which it probably would have been better for me to unbolt this bracket from the block, so that way the block could just lift up itself rather than having the friction of the plates being pushed forward. Once the tack broke and pushed the engine forward, I thought to myself, how are we gonna put this engine back in with that plate having a full weld being solid mounted? But I think if we were to mount this bracket itself onto the plates and then lower the entire engine onto the bracket itself, it might work. If you guys have any comments or suggestions, please let me know, because you guys have been helping me out a lot lately. But as far as the engine location, I am liking the position where it's in, so any issue we'll just work around and try to figure it out. Apart from the broken tack weld, this was very fun and exciting to do. It just gets us one step closer to actually driving this car and to feel the differences that all these changes are going to make. There's really no guide or instructions on how to do this. It's not like I can look something up and follow the steps. So a huge portion of this was just brainstorming and thinking of what will work and what will get in the way of what, and thinking of future things that are not on the car but will be on the car. Regardless, thank you for everyone who commented and contributed ideas in the last video. You guys helped me more than you know. So once again, if you guys have any suggestions or tips, leave them down below, because I do read all the comments. Unfortunately, we are out of time in this video, so if you guys enjoyed this process, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. In the next video, we will address the broken tack as well as continue the progress on number 3. With that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.